Hey everybody, it's Laura Kingen, ready for a Wednesday live demo. Setting up takes me a little bit of time, so I'm ready to begin now. So I am a nationally registered occupational therapist licensed by the state of Arizona. I have worked just about almost 40 years in the field of occupational therapy with expertise in the sensory arena, working with autistic individuals in particular, but also developmental disabilities and the like. So this demo today is about aggression. I've been, there's so many things I want to shout out all at once, so let me backtrack. I'm going to do an introduction, and then I'm going to present what we call a classroom portion of the demo, where I share a topic or concepts, and then we'll do an activity or activities. And I always like to end my sessions with a calming, quiet time kind of an activity. So I'm going to be doing some talking, and then we'll do some active things. So you can anticipate active participation in your own home. That's the idea, is to give you all some ideas of how to address aggression, because it's really become quite an issue in our society as a whole. But I really wanted to target this particular topic right now because I've been following some new autism pages on Facebook. I know there's a lot of families who are really suffering, dealing with the symptoms of autism. And what I'm noticing of late are some very common themes that I feel like through a sensory-oriented kind of an approach can help address at least some of those issues. And I've developed kind of a unique background, and so I want to share that to you. So this is really a community offering. It's free. Please share. Come back and listen to it again, especially for the active part. But please be safe. I'm offering these suggestions to you all, but it's up to you to make it your own and make it safe, because these things that I'm going to be offering to you can have a dangerous component if done without conscious responsibility. So I just want to put that forewarning out. But let's talk about aggression. As an occupational therapist, I work from a perspective, a frame of reference. And in previous videos, I have talked about frames of references and the evaluation process and what I do as a therapist to help somebody along. But I feel like I can apply these principles here through this demo too, so I want to share some of these things. The frame of reference or perspective that I want to propose to OTs. Now, this is a seed planted in the field of occupational therapy when I worked at Apollo College about 25 years ago. That even in our field, we can acknowledge these 4 key areas in an individual's functioning, or even as a societal functioning. We look at mental, physical, emotional, and social/spiritual is how I like to frame it. This is based on the Native American medicine wheel teachings about a circle and the power of a circle and how we are all connected. I know we need to set boundaries on what our own limitations are, and yet my teachings from the Native Americans, we talk about how we are all related. And so we talk about the circle and how we are all connected in this circle. So even in our own individual selves, we can look at the circle within our own being. So we look at our own physical, our own mental, our own emotional, and our own spiritual, social components within our own self. And then as an occupational therapist, I look at that, and then how do we balance that out for health? So I'm applying that to my own personal self, but then we can apply this in these concepts that I want to present to you all. And so this is the framework that I want to talk about aggression. I want to look at mental issues with aggression, emotional, physical, and then social and spiritual. And I kind of put the social spiritual in one of four quadrants. That's how I look at it, because I think the mental, physical, and emotional are really very personal, but it's that part of us where we interact with the outside world. Many people are spiritual, and I know I'm hitting on a delicate area with that. But as an occupational therapist, I'm here to treat my client, and many people are spiritual in nature, and it's important to them, so I include that. And it's that part of us that has to interact with others. And when we talk about aggression, so much of our aggressiveness has to do with other and that social interaction. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. If I was in a classroom situation, we're learning new ways of going about things these days. We do have chat boxes. So if I was in a classroom environment, traditionally, I would ask people, raise your hand, what are some of the symptoms of aggression that you've had to deal with? So I welcome you all in this new kind of modern way to write in the chat box and make some comments. That's fine. And I'm unsure how well I'll be able to handle all that in the middle, but certainly at the end we can look at some of those chats. And in the discussion portion of the event on Facebook, you can add comments too. Just please be kind, okay? Especially when we're talking about aggression. So, what are some aggressive symptoms? And as I was taking notes and preparing, I was thinking about, off the top of my head, aggression, pushing, hair pulling. That was one of the things on the autism pages, hair pulling. Siblings pulling hair, kicking, punching, banging things. Yes, there may be some sound and vocalizations that are accentuated. Maybe shaking, property destruction. There could be I want to put my fists together, I want to punch, right? To the point where it can even become violent or destructive. There's a continuum of expression, and what we're talking about with aggression is really this far end of the spectrum. You've probably heard the term passive aggressiveness. Well, passive is not doing much of anything, where you just let the world impact you, so to speak. And then there's this continuum to aggression to the point of violence and murder and destruction and death. And the continuum anywhere in between is what we're talking about with these symptoms. And a term that, a healthy term for that in between would be assertiveness. You've probably heard that term before. I remember this goes back to early 80s when I was a student. I worked in Concord, New Hampshire, and somebody was working in a prison and was talking about, that's when I learned assertiveness is on that continuum between passive and aggressive. And you can imagine this counselor working in a prison and how much aggressiveness he had to deal with. And so working with assertiveness and being assertive in being able to express yourself would be the healthier version, dare I say, to aggression. Because when I think of aggression, I think it's on a farther end of this continuum where these darker kinds of energies are happening. Are there other kinds of symptoms that you guys can think of about aggression? I think, dare I say, several key factors. Let me backtrack. A couple other notes is when somebody's in a really aggressive place, it's as though it's kind of hard to talk to that person, right? Because sometimes that emotion and that energy just overtakes the situation. And so that's, I was just alluding to how it can impact functionality. And as far as reciprocal social interactions, if somebody is in such a state, they may have more difficulty understanding the other person's perspective. And that can be really complicating when we're talking about relationships, let alone like in families, or even more so in a work environment. And dare I even say, I'm going to kind of get a little edgy today, because what's going on in the world? I mean, what happened at the Capitol? To me, that was a very aggressive act. Whatever the initiating spark that caused that, I think we can agree that there was aggression that was going on. Maybe not everybody can agree, but there was aggressive acts going on without naming names or pointing fingers at anybody. There was aggression. We're getting to such a point in our, not only in our country, but in our world, where there is a lot of aggression. And so that's part of why I'm doing this video. I see nobody is even watching this, because it's very personal and it's very touchy. How do we address the aggression that's going on in our world today? So let's talk about strategies on aggression. Because I just want to like plant some of these seeds. And I think that there's some ideas here. Like, if somebody's aggressive, clearly there's some emotional issues that's going on. There's emotion. There's strong emotion. How do we express ourselves emotionally in a healthy way? If somebody's aggressive, there's something really serious going on. That's a lot of energy. How do we channel that? Certainly, I mean, this, I kind of look at the emotional and the mental piece. Like in preparing for this, I kind of see some overlaps. And I kind of want to address them both, if I may. With the mental piece, certainly having structure and routines and predictability helps to define what's going on. Because I think, especially with autism, so much of what's going on is the individual's feeling overwhelmed. Whether they're oversensitive or hypo-responsive, something's going on. So to be able to have predictability is helpful. And with the structure, what I have found is, and maybe you can relate your own selves, there's something about kind of pushing the boundaries to see where the edge is, so that you know where the boundaries are, right from wrong, and when you cross the line, there's consequences. And dare I say, the issues about setting limits, and I'm smiling because what's going on in our world today is, where are the boundaries? And people are pushing up against certain things, and there's no boundary. So like all this fake news that's gotten so way out of control. Well, it's one thing to have the fake news, but it's another thing about where's the boundaries. And I know I've gotten upset because it's like, where is the boundaries? We're supposed to have laws, and it seems like a lot of laws are being broken today. And how much is that contributing to the aggression? So when we're talking about the topic of aggression, I need to address at least some of this, because it is an issue for all of us, let alone those who are dealing with autism and things are very confusing. So to have structure and predictability, organization and routines is helpful. And as adults, is knowing what my child or client or whomever I'm working with, knowing what their limits are, what their skills, strengths, and weaknesses are. And instead of me saying, here, you do this, I want you to do this, to tune into where they're at and structure things according to their developmental level so that we can build on success. Because otherwise, it's like this adult becomes the domineering individual and saying, do this, do this, do this. And the child is saying, I can't, I'm not able to. And whether they have the communication skills or not, it's through the behavior that they're trying to say something. And some of that aggressiveness very often is if we can interpret what they're trying to say, that's their communication, and that's our way of understanding where they're coming from. And the more that we can understand that and then communicate that to them, can be reinforcing that we are with them. They can calm down, their needs are being met, and move on. So that's kind of this mental emotional piece about, and even the social is the communication and understanding the developmental functioning, the frustration tolerance, and communication. I think those are like the key things, is communication. I think a lot of frustration is because of lack of communication. Another symptom that I've seen very commonly and really have no great answer is when kids, let's see if I can do this, kids bite their hands. A lot of kids, you'll see, have literally scars on their hands, and it's usually like here. And if you've ever had a kid who's either nonverbal or has difficulty communicating and they get frustrated, it's like, they're like, do that with energy. And they have scars, they're hurting themselves. Because, I mean, it's an aggressive act. And I think it's out of frustration and a difficulty in communicating. So the more that we can understand what individuals are trying to communicate, I think that that bodes a great deal towards minimizing aggression. I mean, a big thing that we want to do is prevent aggression in the first place, right? But if somebody is aggressive, how do we manage that aggressive behavior? Or how do we manage our own aggressiveness? And if